Hi all, I have another very interesting game of Magnus Carlsen to show you at the Tatar Steel Masters 2019. So let's see what happens here. Magnus Carlsen playing white against Richard Rapport. E4 by Magnus. C5, knight f3, e6. We have d4, c takes, knight takes d4. Taimanov territory. Sicilian Taimanov, knight c3, queen c7. Magnus chooses g3. Quite often here bishop e3 is played, but the position has balanced chances here. It's about even though it looks very, very aggressive for white castling queenside. We have, so Magnus playing quietly g3, a6, bishop g2, knight f6. White castles d6, and now knight takes c6. You might think this is a little bit odd because it encourages a pawn to come to the center. An alternative here, rook e1, is also seen in this move order where white does actually just take on c6 here, and for example e5 with a small edge. So knight takes c6 immediately, and now we have knight a4. This does a couple of things. It eyes b6. Sometimes maybe white can play for bishop e3 and look at b6, but the other major thing this does is to be able to play c4 with the dreaded marvellous bind, that control over this central square, to try and discourage black from playing d5, for example. We see rook b8 here. If d5, just to show some of the disasters, e takes, c takes, c4 is super strong in this position. For example, queen takes c4, knight b6, forking queen and rook. So this is very dangerous for that diagonal. If that's not possible, if rook b8, c takes, this is just horrible. After bishop f4 in particular, skewing queen and rook. And now rook c1 hitting the queen again, check. And now here, knight c5. This is one of the sharpest ways for white to punish black. And white is ending up securing a big advantage here. And on bishop takes, there's bishop takes b8 here, big advantage. So these variations show it's really quite serious that black cannot play d5 at the moment. Rook b8. c4, establishing this dreaded marvellous bind, that control over the d5 square. c5 is played. On d5 here, just to show the punishment, c takes, bishop f4, pretty similar ideas. Rook c1, but now this is nasty. E takes. For example, e takes, rook e1 check, and white can play rook c6 and drag the queen away for d6 to be crushing. So for example, like this, absolutely disaster scenario for black. So we have c5, b3, bishop e7, bishop b2. Now this does eye the diagonal. Sometimes g7 is going to be a problem for black on castling. So black castles, and this shows really accuracy for bearing in mind the g7 soft spot and also the e5 pawn break. Magnus Carlsen's move here ticks both boxes. The queen can sometimes come to c3. Sometimes it might even support bishop c3 and bishop a5, but also it supports e5 from there. We have knight d7, rook d1 eyeing that d6, bishop b7, and now queen c3 threatening mate in 1. Bishop f6, so just to put that on the board, rook f8, queen takes g7 is checkmate. So bishop f6, queen d2 hitting d6. Now black hasn't got time to take on b2 here. But first we repeat it. Let's just get to the position where we repeat it a bit. Black hasn't got time here to play bishop takes b2 because knight takes b2 leaves d6 hopelessly weak. White's just picking up d6, big advantage. So black goes back with bishop e7, and now f4. So with this bind, white is increasing space advantage. e5 is played. On rook fe8, in fact, there's a concrete threat here of e5, exploiting that pinned pawn against knight on d7. If d5 c takes, this is just nasty. White just picks up a centre pawn for nothing. So in fact, black reacts with e5 to stop e5 from white. We have bishop c3 with ideas of bishop a5, so another useful perk of the queen being on the dark squares here. We have bishop c6. If rook fe8 as an example, bishop a5, this is actually very nasty after bishop h3. This crossfire of the bishops is very impressive here. Say queen c6, bishop takes d7, and here this is an advantage for white. There's no time for black to take here. It's harmless taking here. There's no mate threat. The king's always got f2 on queen h1. So if queen takes, there's knight takes c5, exploiting the pin and about to pick up the bishop. Big advantage. So bishop c6 is played. Bishop a5, which gives the parking space for the knight with tempo, hitting the queen, and the knight returns back just in time, protecting that central pawn. So white's play is extremely elegant and positional, and with tactical undertones all the time. We have e takes f4. If rook fe8, white can gain space, it seems, with f5. It seems you might think this is controversial for white weakening the dark squares, but for example, this approach as a simulation where white can put pressure on d6 here and then play for a bit of dark square grip, pardon me, like this, for example, this kind of thing is going to signify a big advantage positionally for white. So we have e takes f4, g takes, rook fe8, and now e5, yeah, piling up the pressure on that d file. So very critical position. If d takes, then white just plays bishop takes c6, queen takes d7. Thanks very much. Massive advantage, picking up a piece. Bishop takes g2 was played, queen takes. D takes. If queen takes g2 check here, king takes. That nasty pin on the d pawn, knight f8. White plays bishop c7 here, forking d6 and b8. Big advantage. So here, d takes e5 was played, knight d5. So not taking the queen off, just keeping the pressure. And black is pretty tied down here. The rook can't move, for example, without a total disaster. Knight takes e7 check and then picking up the queen. So what can black actually do here? Knight f6, there's knight takes, there's f takes e5, big advantage, just picking up that pawn. King h8, there's bishop c7, forking b8 and e5. So this is just very nice. After taking here, it's very precarious position for black indeed. That's just absolutely winning, yeah. So we have e4. This looks a little bit on the desperate side. Now Magnus avoids taking this pawn. It might give black a little bit of counterplay. He actually plays, for example, with knight f6, there might be a bit of play. He actually plays bishop c3, just threatening checkmate in one. Now, if knight f6, that's not good enough because of knight takes. There's a pinned g7 pawn. That's not helping. So we see actually here, so it did weaken that diagonal. After bishop c3, a concession, f6, king h1. And now white is preparing rook g1 to threaten mate again. This g file seems very good. So Magnus has invested a pawn here to have this fabulous looking attacking position. Is it worth it? After bishop f8, the knight retreats to e3, and which vacates d5 for a rook lift now. So Magnus is playing like Leela, the fantastic neural network, switching the rook in on the h file. Really dynamic stuff here. Queen e6, rook h5, queen f7, queen h3. So alignment against h7, that needs to be protected. g6 weakens the diagonal a bit more. Rook h4, rook b6, and now f5. Again, concrete issues for black to solve. If g5, rook takes g5, exploiting the pinned pawn. Big advantage for white. So knight e5 to try and blunt that bishop. Knight d5, putting the pressure on f6 though. Nice central knight as well. Rook d6. F takes. Knight takes. And now, guess what Magnus plays in this position if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. A beautiful combinatory finish played here. Okay, bishop takes f6 check. We have rook takes f6, and now what? What would you play here? And this ends the game actually. White's play, a crushing move. Okay. Rook takes h7. Yes, this finishes the game because now black resigned. If queen takes h7 check, knight takes f6, picks up the rook on e8, the exchange up and a pawn up, and the knight can come back. If the bishop, say, goes to g7, there's knight d6. The knight's going to crawl back, whatever happens, it seems. In this, let's have a look at this position. If king g8 had been played here instead of rook takes f6, can you see what white can play? Rook takes g6 is really strong. For example, pinning the queen. And here, yeah, if h takes, then there's rook h8 checkmate. So, yeah, this is a really crushing move. Bishop takes f6 check. Now, there's a lot of tactical downsides behind the seemingly elegant positional play of Magnus Carlsen. So chess is a very concrete game, but beautiful manoeuvring, beautiful pawn sacrifice to create really dynamic potential against the black kingside. A lot of pressure, and black cracked under the pressure. And you can test yourself on all the key variations showing the tactical downsides of various things. At chessworld.net, you can go to the Improve menu, learn from the masters to get the annotated games, but you can also go to the new Improve menu, puzzle books. This is under puzzles, and all the variations tested here with a puzzle. So check that out as a revision tool for the variations presented. You might find that interesting, and some other games also are there as puzzle books. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this, and become a member at chessworld.net, play against other YouTubers, check out these improving resources available. Okay, comments, questions, donations, see the description. Likes, shares, subscribes with the notification bell, really appreciated. Thanks very much.